Okay, this video is example number 5. I titled it To Be or To Become. That is not the question. This goes all the way back to Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. These little symbols here, that's just the word and the I guess diacriticals, these little dots beneath it, and this little dash. Those are punctuation marks that were inserted onto the text hundreds of years after the copies of the original that we still have, the extant copies. That was hundreds of years later. So that doesn't serve us as an algorithm because we don't have any device, written device, no lexical device. Actually, there's no rule of grammar, syntax, or even a clause structure, as some advocate, that would actually function as an objective algorithm to determine when to do this. Many of those things have been historically demonstrated and then subsequently shown to simply reflect the thinking of the time. So we'll go to our text and just see exactly what the bigger question might be. And this is just simply in beginning. And this is Elohim, and that's Bara. Elohim created, and this is the sign of the direct object when the object's definite. You don't need a grammar lesson, but the heavens and the earth. It seems that the controversy starts quickly. Here we have in, and then of course beginning. You can say origin. This is from the word head, like the summit, head of a river head, or the summit of a mountain. This could even be in earlier forms. You can go back all the way to what they call Paleo-Hebrew, referring to carving or shaping something. Of course, here's the word El, strong one. These could be translated, this could be translated powers. If you need a plural form of it, often translated God, of course. And this is not a lesson on that. So now we've got all that here. In beginning, God created is a sign of the direct object. And here's the heavens, plural. That's not my opinion, and nor is it my preference. That's just the facts of the text. And here's another sign of the direct object when the object's definite. And here's the earth. None of this is complicated. What takes place is here, and then he says the earth now, and the earth. The earth. No, I'm not writing backwards. Hebrews right to left. You know this, but. And here's the word HAYAH. It's from HAYAH, and this is where the question has become somewhat overly primed, I would say. I'm going to write that in, primed. And somewhat, a lot more energies in this than is actually produced in the text. And this is tohu, vahu. This is the vacant and waste, or vice versa. That's become disputed. How you translate this? Is it something positive, stative, or negative? You can put desolate and waste. That gets rather dramatic when you say here. Now, if you say become, people say that means something happened that caused this. And of course, you know, people say there's a theory, which is a good word. It's a Greek word, and it refers to observations are made about this text, and they say if you say become, that proves the gap theory, which there's numerous ones. There's plural theories of that. Or if you say be, some say it disproves it. That's really not that's not accomplished by this, which we know that. It's the bigger picture is there's no algorithm. I'll go back to this. There's no algorithm. Someone said that to translate HAYAH as become, would violate some Hebrew syntax, grammar, or clause structure. What intrigues me is it would have been just as easy for the person who asserted that to say what syntax, what rule of syntax or grammar, or even clause structure. Sometimes you'll hear that, or what's violated. When someone doesn't say that, they're just simply admitting there's no algorithm, there is no hermeneutic device for that. The bigger thing that I'd like to share with you is the fact that there's large assumptions have been made that if you are accused, and people are now accused, if you can believe that, of the gap, if you're a gap proponent, they assume, one, if you're gap, they say you believe in an old earth, and then B, if you are non-gap, which is you're silly, I know, but this is what's going on, that you believe in a young earth. Here's perhaps the biggest disappointment of these. There's no such thing as either of these. The Bible does not discuss the age of the earth, that is, any more than the age of Adam. We believe Adam was created on one day, that is day 6, the 6th day. But no one knows how old Adam was. We might say he was 100% developed. That is, he wasn't a baby Adam. But as far as his age, some have begun to develop conjecture. Maybe he was 21, or they say maybe 30, or ... It doesn't matter. Speculation about the age of the earth is so rampant today that people have decided to take such generic categories. If you knew the age of the earth, that is, as people say the Bible teaches, we wouldn't use words like young or old. Some of us who teach there are periods of time, might say the earth has existed for thousands of years. Let's say you say it's existed for 6,000 years. 6,000 years. But now how old it is, that's a completely different matter. It's just like Adam, he may have existed. We know he existed less than a day, less than 1 day, less than a 24-hour, if you need to say that. If you said he existed less than a 24-hour day, which is fine, it doesn't answer his age. Was he 21 or 30, vice versa? But that's never been important because people know better. Creationists know that anything created will always be older than the time it's existed. It's just really regrettable that so much has been said against others. People have been, as we would call it, primed negatively against gap, which it's amazing to suggest that because I translate HAYAH has become that somehow I'm then for the gap, and if that's true, then I'm for old earth, and then if that's true, then I have somehow become an advocate of evolution. You see how that's letterism in reverse. Letterism builds too much into one term, and anti-letterism builds a very large negation of someone according to that term. And here there's people who are now against gap, and they're accused of being young earthers. This is really sad. It's unnecessary. They're considered non-gap, and they're accused of being a young, which knows how generic these terms are, very vague and ambiguous, nothing specific about that. It means young in comparison to the other advocacy or the other side, and then somehow you're anti-science, I guess, which is ridiculous. Anti-science. And each side now is so polarized that when you come back to simply wanting to use the language, you're no longer considering the text and what's allowed. Become is valid. Be is valid. That's valid. And become is valid. And you can translate freely, knowing that within that which is valid in language, that you can do that. But now, even whichever one you choose, if it's based on how you've been charged with, that is primed, or as the Middle East calls it, radicalized, and you're choosing it intentionally to support a young or an old, then you're really not being honest with the text. That's eisegesis, not exegesis, and you know what that is. You certainly wouldn't be watching this video. Again, it's disappointing for those of us who consider the Bible to be a divine construct, because then people want you to choose based on something taught offline. Then you come back and begin to manipulate your translation to reflect what you believe. That's a tendency we all share, and it's not anything that a student who's grown up at all in the learning process would care to continue to adhere to that, because then we're really not discipling people and calling them to come out. But anyway, that's enough. It's just regrettable that there are these, I'll make it very complicated. It's just really sad that there's all this harsh stuff, and there's these, one against the other, and I've never heard of it. I guess I just don't get out much, because it's getting worse and worse, and be careful how you pick it. I'd find out who's buying my lunch first, and if someone's a young earther and they want to buy my lunch, then I'll be young earth until the ticket's paid, and then I'll leave. And if you're an old earther and you are trying to defend yourself that you don't believe in evolution, whatever, and that you're pro-science, but you don't see a contradiction between science and the Bible, I'm still really interested if you're going to buy my lunch, because as someone who cares about the text and is willing to read it and consider it the divine construct, you won't find this. There's, another text exists that actually has this same arrangement, that is, it's the same grammar, stem, state, and it translates another English translation, and it shows the be form. However, the translators are so diverse. They use become and be in so many different places. You can find become in over 100 locations, and then of course you can find a form of be in even more. Again, driving toward a determinant to come to a conclusion that's skewed by a bias that's established before the person ever comes to the text is difficult. But it is valid to say become, and you don't have to then fall for the accusation that you're old earther, or that you advocate evolution, or vice versa. And if you say be, it doesn't mean you're a young earther and that you're anti-science, or that you're anti-gap, or any of those things. This is probably the earliest point which the consequences of the downfall of the devil can be introduced, and are introduced by advocates of that. The chief concern here was to give a rationale by Moses to Hebrew emancipates for where they're going to a promised land that would be very difficult and arduous on them, having been multi-generationally discipled and enculturated in Egypt, to remain separate and distinct. And he's giving them a rationale. So whether or not you see this as a complete, perfect creation here in verse 1, and then you believe it came to be, none of these conclusions that are now attached to it emotionally exist. Or do you see this as an introductory statement, and then beginning with this verse, or this part of verse 2, an explanation of it? It's all valid. It's just you have to separate the text, which is good because it's called the Holy Bible. It's separated. So when you separate it from all these emotionally charged things, you see, now you don't have to accuse someone of violating syntax, grammar, clause structure. You don't have to, negate other Christians. You can go to the text. You can warn people about the consequences. If indeed this is where they began, it wouldn't matter if the consequences of his downfall still occurred. That was the emphasis. It seems like that's quite incidental today. The spiritual battle that we're in, I think that's indicative. That is these emotionally charged, primed negations of people based on something for which there's no algorithm. So that's enough. It may be disappointing, but it's worthy of studying it. Enjoy it.